Greetings, everyone. My name is Celia Brown, and I'm calling you from New York. Welcome to the pre-summit Global Youth Mental Wellness in Accra, Ghana, taking place July 28th to July 30th, 2020. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a survivor of mental health services. I'm a peer specialist. I'm a peer supporter. I'm a human rights activist. And I have been part of the consumer survivor ex-patient movement for 20 years in the United States and beyond, focusing on human rights and mental health. I want to say that peer support has saved my life. And to give you a little bit of a history, in the late 1980s, I became the first peer specialist to work at a psychiatric hospital in the Bronx. This was made out of a research grant from the National Institute of Mental Health. I worked alongside intensive case managers and peer specialists and paraprofessionals who were non-peers. This is a research project for 5 years. And what they wanted to test in terms of outcomes, can ex-patients be members and work in the mental health system? Could they fully be employed? And could they do social change? Change the way that people look at peers who are diagnosed with a mental diagnosis, a mental illness. And throughout my presentation, I'm going to say different language. This language is really important. So I may say a person labeled with the mental illness, persons with psychiatric histories, persons with psychosocial disabilities, which I know is an international term. I want to refrain from saying mentally ill, a mentally ill person. I think we evolved from that. We want to look at people first, and then the mental health condition. So you'll hear that throughout my presentation. Peer support is rooted in the peer self-help movement. And the two values of the movement is self-determination and self-definition. And what does that mean? It means that people can define who they are, and based on a perceived mental health diagnosis, you still can be who you are. Like for me, I'm someone's sister, someone's daughter, I'm a mother. I'm more than what the diagnosis says I should be. So when I first came, I met people who were a part of the self-help consumer survivor movement, who said that they wanted to create alternatives to mental health services that were run by them for them. So this is kind of the planning that happened from the late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And just to give you a note is that people with psychiatric histories were thought of people who could never function in society. And the best they can do is to be institutionalized indefinitely in their life. So they weren't seen as people that can actually recover. Now we have that word, recovery. Recovery wasn't a word that was used in the 80s. This person had a chemical imbalance, had to take medication or treatment, and they were not seen as human. They were not seen as human beings. But that changed over time, and I'm glad that it did, because it's important to see everyone with different gifts and perspectives that they share with the world. And so peer specialists, I'm happy to say, I was a part of creating After 5 years of the research project, I helped to create the Peer Special Civil Service title, which means that peers can work in the civil service system with nurses, with social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, with mental health therapy aides, that they were going to be a part of the workforce. And it happened. In February 2nd of 1995, the Peer Special Civil Service title was adopted by the Civil Service Commission, which approves all titles that have to happen. Now, the title was there and approved, but the actual working for the State Office of Mental Health didn't happen until December 1998. And what was decided is that peer specialists would work in outpatient mental health clinics, running groups. So groups like WRAP, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan, helping people develop a plan, helping people deal with their employment goals, and all sorts of things that were in person-centered and individualized for that person. Along this time, peer specialist training was developed. The first training, and I want to credit my ancestor, Harry the Harp, who was a part of the movement, created the peer specialist training in New York City. He wanted the training to be for people who were not only experiencing psychiatric issues and mental health conditions, but had substance use issues, or who was homeless, because Howard the Harp himself was homeless. And he created this program by a peer for peers. He has since died in February of 1995. And during that time, his Peer Specialist Training Center was renamed after him, called Howie the Harp Peer Advocacy Center. It's located in Manhattan and Harlem. It's run by an African American woman named Lene Brown. And I'm also a trainer there, and I give them this history when I go there for new peers who are just going out in the field. So I wanted to give you a little bit of history of that. So I want to turn my attention to, I want to give you a definition of peer support. So peer support is the process of giving and receiving encouragement and assistance to achieve long-term recovery. Peer supporters offer emotional support, share knowledge, teach skills, provide practical assistance, and connect people with resources, opportunities, communities of supports, and other people. This definition comes from Sherry Mead and Phyllis Solomon, who are researchers. So in behavioral health, peers offer their, now we say their unique lived experience with mental health conditions to provide support focused on advocacy, education, and motivation. Let me give you some examples of peer support. So in no way or fashion, peer support, and I know some people will say, well, you know, people should be getting clinical services, and I'm not advocating against that. Whatever someone needs, if they need clinical, if they need to see a psychiatrist, they need case management services, that's all great. What I want to say is that peer support is a way that people don't feel so isolated in the world. Like if you're a peer that's going through something like maybe suicidal feelings, but then you speak to another peer that's actually going through that, okay? Or a peer that's having anxiety or dealing with some emotional issues, then who better to talk to someone who's actually went through it, okay? So peer support is really sharing your story. It's not giving people advice. You can give suggestions, but just like someone hearing your story means that they're not alone, and it becomes reciprocal. So I could be helping you and you can be helping me. That's the beauty of it. So it's not you're the person that has the problem, can't do anything in their life. You're empowered to say, hey, I've gone through the same thing. Here's my story. So that's some of the principles and values of peer support. So peer support is validating the experience of someone else. You don't have to understand every single thing that's happened in that person's life. But it's really empowering if someone hears your story and says, you know what, I've been feeling alone all this time. And now I don't have to feel alone because I have someone, or I can speak to someone who's been through that experience. Being in peer support is being a good listener. So it's not about judgment. Like, you should have got help, or you should have done this, or why are you acting this way? You know, that's not where peer support is. It's actually when you listen to someone and they tell their story, that person is feeling better and feeling supported. That even though maybe the solution's going to come at a later time, but that person says, hey, I'm being validated. You know, it's okay for me to go through a mental, emotional wellness, emotional challenge. And that at some point that will lead to wellness. So since I'm on video, I would like to, and I was going to do in our workshop, hopefully I'll be able to do it, but I want to do just a short role play. So I'm speaking to the youth of today. I'm very excited to be talking to you and your family members and other people that are in your life. So first, when you think of peer support, think about who are your circle of friends that you feel like you can talk to and that really support who you are. That you don't have to be a different person, you can just be who you are. It could be friends. Is there any family member? Is it a brother? Is it a sister? Cousins? Anybody in your family that really understands you and you trust? Because peer support is also about trust. Or are they co-workers or colleagues that can support you? So we're going to take 1 minute for you to think about that. Okay. Maybe a good way to do this is make a list. Get a paper and pen and just write a list. Sometimes you will come up with people you never even thought of that could support you. So, and I also keep a list of who is in my circle, who's my circles of support. And this is very, very important because I understand, and I was a youth before, I do have a son, and sometimes I work with youth, that when you're feeling sad and depressed and going through anxiety, you may become isolated, and that means that you may not reach out to other people. So this is an opportunity for you to know that you're not alone. You can embrace peer support. You can embrace people that you trust and will listen to your story, even if it doesn't make any sense to you. So I wanna share with you one of our pioneers in the consumer survivor movement. She's now our ancestor. Her name was Judy Chamberlain. And she wrote a paper called the Ex-Patient Survivor Movement. And I'm just giving you a phrase that always stuck with me and has helped me in my life. So self-help is a concept, not a single program model. The concept is a means by which people become empowered and begin to think of themselves as competent individuals as they present themselves in new ways to the world. Thank you. So I wanna switch a little bit and provide you some information about tools of peer support for youth to achieve emotional wellness for the betterment of your lives. So one of the things, and I know that this was something that I think is very, very important, is it's good to have a mentor. I was a mentor, and I'm still a mentor. I mentor people all the time that are coming into the mental health field or coming into the peer movement. And peer mentoring could be a formalized program, which I'm working on, where there are mentors and there are people what they call mentees. This has happened very well in high school programs, where you're paired with a college student. A college student is paired with a high school student, give them knowledge about supporting them through high school. And I was somebody who actually was in college, and I mentored a high school student. And I really love doing that, because I really like supporting people, sharing expertise, but I also like to learn from them. So it doesn't mean I'm going in and I know more than you and you know nothing. I think the paradigm is shift, that you start off with a mentor, but the mentor learns so much from the youth, from the mentee person. So it really is designed to help with emotional well-being, social wellness, and be able to successfully navigate the complexities of life. And this is not always easy for someone who's 15, up to 25 years old. Sometimes they need a mentor. They may not say they do, but sometimes they do. So I'm gonna ask you again, it'd be great if this program could be developed, but sometimes mentors are people in your everyday life. So you may think of, I want to follow my mom. My mom's like a role model to me. Or there's someone who's doing well, or some topic that you want to learn about. So you may want to talk about that person. You may want to learn about, social media, or, getting on the computer, or, I'm just giving you some examples. But think about what it is that you feel you want to learn, and seek out a role model who you can follow, you can talk to, so you can gain that knowledge. Being a youth today sometimes is very hard. We are in the era of the social media. When I was growing up, we had no cell phones. We didn't have computers, and we couldn't get on social media at all, because it wasn't invented yet. But as it evolved, youth are more, and people in general are more on social media. And this is kind of a way that people can cope with life's challenges, and working on to achieve well-being without going through discrimination. So sometimes you don't have to see the person in the flesh, but you can talk to them through various ways of social media, like Snapchat, like Google Meet, like Zoom, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So I want to encourage you to use these platforms for peer support. So if you're having issues about employment, bring that up. There's a lot of youth and people that are, have been employed, or issues about going to school, to college, or to high school, or to middle school. And you can talk to other people about some of those issues that come up. Any volunteer work. I'm a strong believer in employment because I think it leads to empowerment, especially for people who and youth that have a diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis. I think employment is important, volunteer work is important. It all leads to wellness. It's, you know why it's also good for you to connect on social media? It's because you are connecting with your own peers, your age group, youth. And you can do online peer support services. And more that is happening, that there are more online peer support groups now that we're in COVID-19. So it's important that you utilize some of those services that are online. Another suggestion, and I know everyone out there may not have internet, may not have a computer, a smartphone, but maybe you have WhatsApp, which is really accessible to people in all internationally and globally. So you can create a video chat with a couple of your friends for free. You don't have to pay anything. Or you can have a one-to-one conversation with your friend or a colleague on WhatsApp. And you can schedule times that you're going to do it, or you can just spontaneously do that. I want to say one of the things that I have noticed has really been happening in youth, young people, is the idea of suicide attempts, not wanting to live anymore, not knowing who to speak to. And it's happening in my community, the African American community, as well as all other communities. Life can be hard, and it's good if you have peer support to help you through that. We now have something called Safe Talk. It's an international program. It's developed by a program called Living Works, and we have a lot of acronyms, so you'll be learning a lot of acronyms. But it's suicide awareness. Okay, so it's suicide awareness. So I'm actually a trainer. I just became a trainer in February. I do training in suicide alertness and awareness. And what I'm finding out is that suicide used to be a secret. So the person could never come out and talk about it, but might have completed suicide. Now, there's certain symptoms that you may see. The person's isolated, the person's not acting a certain a way, they're not acting like themselves, they're not going to school, they're doing drugs more. These are signs, and it's okay now for you as a youth to say, what's going on with you? I'm really worried about you. Are you thinking about suicide? Thinking about suicide. And that brings an invitation, they call it, for that young person to say, yes, I haven't been feeling that way. And you as the person, don't feel you have to handle that on your own. You can provide some resources where they can speak to someone who is an expert with suicide prevention. So it's okay now to ask people, your loved ones, your friends, are you thinking about suicide? The other thing I think that might be a good tool for peer support is developing a telephone tree. Here we call it a support line. So you can develop a tree. So one of your friends or family members is not doing well, what can you do? Obviously, at some point, they may be speaking to someone in the mental health field. But for you as a young person, as a peer, you can say, oh, here are her friends. Let's build a telephone tree to call this person who's in distress and who's not feeling well, to give support. Doesn't mean that you're in charge of solving the problem they're having. It means that you're giving them support so they know you're there, that you care about them, that in some kind of way they will be able to say, you know what, maybe I need support. And as I said, peer support helps you, as I said with Judy Chamberlain's quote, it helps you look at yourself in new ways. So it's up to you to look at your story and how you heal, and how other stories are shared of recovery and peer support, and how did they heal. And I get a lot of calls and emails about, I need peer support. I need to talk to someone who's gone through similar things I've gone through, or that similar experiences, to identify with me, to validate my experience. So I am very, very excited. I love speaking about peer support. I hope today that I gave you some hope, some ways to, tools for peer support, some new ideas that you may want to try where you live. And I want to say that young people and youth, you can change your life anytime, individually, anytime in your life. It's never too late. And you can also change the lives of others. Remember that. Thank you so much.